YouTube! Welcome to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I am very excited to be doing a book review for you guys. This was requested by one of my friends who just recently subscribed to my channel. Thank you so much. She wanted to know what was the last book that I read that almost made me cry. So I'm going to start by saying that that book was Far From You by Tess Sharpe. I'm going to read the back and then we'll get started. And I do want to note, I didn't cry at this one, but I almost did, and I will explain why. Sophie Winters nearly died, twice. The first time she's 14 and escapes a near-fatal car accident with scars, a bum leg, and an addiction to oxy that'll take years to kick. The second time she's 17 and it's no accident. Sophie and her best friend, Mina, are confronted by a masked man in the woods. Sophie survives, but Mina is not so lucky. When the cops deem Mina's murder a drug deal gone wrong, casting partial blame on Sophie, no one will believe the truth. Sophie has been clean for months, and it was Mina who led her into the woods that night. After a forced stint in rehab, Sophie returns home to a chilling new reality. Mina's brother won't speak to her, her friends fear she'll relapse, old friends have become enemies, and Sophie has to learn how to live without her other half. To make matters worse, no one is looking in the right places, so Sophie must search for Mina's murderer on her own. But with every step, Sophie comes closer to revealing all, about herself, about Mina, and about the secret they shared. So this book, it's kind of a cross genre. It's marketed as mystery thriller, and it definitely has elements of that, but it explores a lot more. And at the heart of this book, there are two things. There's this relationship. Basically, Mina and Sophie had feelings for each other big time, but it was something that never really materialized until after Mina was gone. So there's female-female feelings and potential for a romantic relationship, and there's also loss, of course, because Mina was killed, and Sophie is a wonderful main character. You can really identify with her, especially. So one of the things that's very impactful about this book, and I'm not going to go into too many details about my personal life, but Sophie, this is kind of told, there's some flashbacks and then there's the main storyline, but essentially Sophie was a drug addict. She was in a bad car accident and ended up getting addicted to pills, and it just kind of put a wedge between her and Mina a little bit and impacted her family, impacted herself, and then she goes basically to rehab and comes out and is in recovery. And the thing is that so many books out there do not focus on characters in recovery. It's all about the evils of drug addiction and the, descent into, just hitting rock bottom or all this stuff. But they never really focus much on a character who's been to the bottom and is trying to climb back up. And Sophie has to deal with all these broken relationships because, unfortunately, addiction just tears people apart. And it's just a really awful thing, and I feel like there aren't enough young adult books that detail it. I mean, there's a couple, there's the Crank series, although I wasn't a huge fan of that, actually. I'll explain why in a different video. Heroine by Mandy McGinnis was a really good one about a girl who gets addicted to pills and then turns to heroin in her descent. But at the end of that book, there's not really a recovery process. So many books, if they do talk about drugs, skip over that. So she's one of the few characters who's actively in recovery and dealing with the aftermath that I found. And she's trying to handle that and handle her best friend and potential lover's death, dealing with her bisexuality, and trying to solve a murder mystery. So there's a lot going on, and so I can see why people might not have been as satisfied with the mystery elements. In fact, I've read this book 3 times now. The first time I read it, I think I probably gave it 3.5 or 4 stars just because I was like, yeah, the whodunit wasn't spectacular. It was fine. It was a good book. Writing's fine. But then the second time I read it, it was a couple of years later. I was a little bit older and had a little bit more life experience, and it was just like, oh, this is good. And then the last time I read it was not too long ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, because especially with like her parents just worrying about her relapsing and her trying to basically rise up from who she was and have this new life while people are holding her past against her. You know, it touches on that. And I wish it touched on it a little bit more, but ultimately there's so much going on with the book that I know that there wasn't, you know, enough time unless this would have been a huge book. In fact, honestly, I could have, you know, just taken Sophie and just watched her life. She's a strong character. She's been through a lot. She's trying to figure out who killed her friend while also dealing with the fact that nobody trusts her. Everyone thinks that she's still a drug addict, once a drug addict, always a drug addict. And also just dealing with the fact that, you know, she's in recovery, and just fighting your demons and addictions is incredibly difficult, and just people not understanding that she's just trying her best, and that she ultimately does. That's the thing, is she does not cave into her addiction again, and other people might believe her, but she believes herself. And I thought that was really, really powerful. And of course the ending, I was like, oh my gosh. And it's just, yeah, it deals with so many things. And the more I read it, the more I really appreciate it, and just think it's so impactful. That's why it almost made me cry that third time, especially at the end. And, you know, there's possibility and hope for her, even though Mina's gone, and she gets some sort of redemption for herself. It's a really powerful book, especially if you've been touched by addiction, you know somebody who's been touched by addiction. You know, I think it's a good book for that in particular, because other books with any kind of drugs or alcoholism, because alcoholism is an addiction, it's basically alcohol's drugs, so, you know, basically they're interchangeable, and people suffering from that, it just, yes, especially like some of the broken trust, and that she wants to get that back, but the reality is it takes months, sometimes years, to regain it. And of course I did like the mystery elements, even though I still wasn't, you know, like sold on the whodunit per se. I mean, it makes sense, and like it wrapped up. It just I tend to like super twisty, like oh, you know, kind of thing, like big blown away plot twist, and that's not necessarily this book, but that's not really, I don't think, the point of the book. The point of it is the relationship, and ultimately Sophie's struggle with herself. So that's why I think you should pick this up. Young adult book. It's just really fantastic. I know I say fantastic a lot, but it really is. It's wonderful. It's excellent. It just struck me on such this, you know, a visceral level, that just because someone is an addict does not make them a bad person. That you can overcome your demons, and you can live your life without ever touching that substance again. So, and also, I did appreciate that there's some bi-representation in this as well, and, you know, again, it handled grief and loss, and that she felt extreme grief and loss, but did not cave and did not fall into others' expectations of her, and she followed her convictions. So, anyway, I'm gonna cut this review off. Please go check it out. It's great. I definitely recommend reading it maybe a couple of times. The first time you're gonna be sucked more into the mystery, but then the second and third time you're gonna start seeing this character study, and you're gonna really focus more on the relationships and the, you know, recovery aspect and everything. So please check it out. Far From You, Tess Sharpe. Also, before I go, I think this cover is very aesthetically pleasing. It's like a dark purple with the lights, and very pretty. So 5 out of 5 stars. Go read it. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. And also, if you have any recommendations of any characters who are in recovery, or like kind of more subtle murder mysteries, or dealing with grief or anything like that, I would really love to read those. So please give me some suggestions in the comments. If you've read this, what did you think of it? And yeah, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, happy reading, and I will talk to you guys later. Thanks. Bye.